Welcome to an early edition of the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com. We're starting 2 hours early today. Why? Because we don't want to interrupt you during your basketball watching of March Madness. Kevin Rogers and Thom Cunningham with you as we have first round action for today in the NCAA Tournament. It's a Friday. Usually there's first round action on Friday, but it's the second day, not the first day. And we had the first four last night, and we'll go over that first before we get into today's action. And Tom, obviously the big story last night was the rally by UCLA to beat Michigan State and advance to the first round of the tournament. And UCLA was down huge in this game. They come back late. They were down 5 in the final minute. They tie it. They win it in overtime. I guess the first question is, how surprised were you that UCLA, in spite of digging that big hole, they were able to rebound, come back, and win the game?
It was a bit surprising to see UCLA come back and win that game. I actually picked UCLA to win straight up. The money line was plus 150 when I took them, and so I wasn't surprised UCLA won. I was surprised they came back in the fashion they did and win the game. The foul trouble started becoming a real issue for Michigan State near the end of the game. The real story here, though, is the injury to Johnny Juzang. I don't know if anyone saw this late in the game in overtime. He twisted his right ankle. He had, I believe it was 27 points for the Bruins in that game. If he cannot go in round, 1 or 2, whatever it is.
1.
Yeah. When they face BYU, if he cannot go, that is a substantial loss on top of the already injury list that UCLA is just littered with, from Chris Smith to Jalen Hill, and now you're talking about Johnny Juzang. That basically just leaves Jules Bernard, Tiger Campbell, and Cody Riley, other than Yami Jaquez at this point. But the fact that I just named 4 good players who can score the ball while UCLA is missing 3 other good players, that speaks to the depth that UCLA has and what Mick Cronin has been able to accomplish this year, mixing and matching lineups, it seems, on a daily basis. So good job by the Bruins. I'm not surprised they won. And if anything, they've earned my conviction in possibly taking them over BYU due to the fact that they came from behind and won the game.
There were a lot of huge comebacks last night. First of all, UCLA down 11 at the half. They come back and beat Michigan State. Michigan State was a huge public favorite, and we had talked about it yesterday. They had 3 big wins at home as a dog against Ohio State, Illinois, and Michigan. They were a terrible favorite this year. They were up big. They couldn't cover. They lose outright. And UCLA, who struggled late in the season, they found a way to come back. Now, in the other 11-11 game, Drake and Wichita State, terrible first half. Drake comes back, wins it. The total never, or the over never threatened, 53-52. What about that one with Wichita State, who we talked about as the top team in the American record-wise, even though we know Houston's the best team, and then they just don't really play well the last 3 games, the 2 in the American tournament and here against Drake.
No, and I was listening to Gary Parrish, who's a well-respected member of the media in college basketball. You can probably see him on CBS. Gary Parrish was talking about how Wichita State looked like the 3rd best team in the American last night, and I'd have to agree with that, Memphis being the 2nd best team in the American. If you recall, the top Wichita State shooter, Tyson, I know I'm going to botch his last name, Etatine, however you pronounce it, he only had 1 point, okay? And Wichita State ended up losing 53-52. The last time he had 1 point or less than 5 points, and he's their top scorer for Wichita State, they were blown out by Memphis as well. So I think what happened with the Drake game is that Wichita State was just exposed as being very one-dimensional, that if their top scorer is not scoring, they cannot touch 60 points. So if Wichita State, if this wasn't going to happen in the play-in game, it was very well most likely going to happen in round 2. There was no way Wichita State would get to the Sweet 16 without being exposed, because they're so one-dimensional with one player. Now you go to Drake, they've now covered the spread in 22 of 28 games, and they're missing their starting point guard, and their best player, their leading scorer, isn't even 100% right now. He had surgery in February. And so I would consider this a huge, huge win for Drake, obviously, because they won the game, but they covered the spread as an underdog with basically their 2 best players either not playing or not at 100%. So great game by Youssef. Joseph Youssef went off for Drake, and he's a guy to keep an eye on now when they take on USC. So Drake, excellent win. Wichita State, they were a little bit exposed in my mind.
In the 2 16-16 games, you had comebacks. One fell short, Appalachian State. They were down 16 to Norfolk State at the half. A lot of money came in on Appalachian State. They were down 16 to this Norfolk State team. App State outscores them 33-18 in the second half. They lose 54-53. St. Mary's falls, or Mount St. Mary's, falls to Texas Southern 60-52 in a game in which Mount St. Mary's was up 10 at the half, and they got outscored by 18 in the second half. And we had talked about Texas Southern as always a team out of the SWAC that loads up in non-conference. They always get ready for their conference schedule, and they beat Prairie View A&M in the SWAC championship, and then they fall behind early. So now Texas Southern, obviously very solid win for them to come back and advance to the first round of the tournament.
Yeah, and Johnny Jones, coach of Texas Southern, this is his first NCAA tournament win for as long as he has been in college basketball, and for as many teams as he's actually taken to the tournament. LSU, probably the most notable with him. So it was good to see him get that first win with Texas Southern. It's just a feel-good moment for people who follow the sport. Whether you had Mount St. Mary's winning or Texas Southern, I don't think that really mattered. I think everyone was very happy. Coach Jones was able to get his first tournament win, so that was good. But going into more along the lines of the betting of the situation, Mount St. Mary's had a 10-point lead at halftime, and we all thought that this game was over. The Mountaineers were going to run away with it, but Texas Southern showed their athleticism, their size, and their scoring ability, which they are one of the better teams in terms of scoring points. And then you look to the other game, the Appalachian State Norfolk State game. Appalachian State came back, like you said. They actually took a lead late in that game, but Hawkins was just way too much coming off the bench. He had 24 points for Norfolk State, but neither of these teams are going to do much against the number one seeds that they have to go up against, Gonzaga and Michigan.
Yeah, really. I hate to say it like that. We saw Virginia lose a few years ago, but Virginia, they weren't very good offensively. So Gonzaga's going to light up. They're going to move on and advance to the second round. Now let's look ahead to today's action inside of the NCAA tournament, and we begin with actually here. We're going to start in the middle of the page here, even though we have some. Let's go to the odds page instead. How about we do that? All right. We have Florida and Virginia Tech right here, 737, 738. That is the first game, and you see now Virginia Tech laying 1. Again, this one is a really tough one to handicap. The COVID issues with both these teams, they were missing a lot of time. But I want to go with this first, Tom, on the Gators. Yeah. Your thoughts on them, that they just down the stretch weren't very sharp. It was as simple as that. They lost to South Carolina at home. They lost to Missouri at home. They lost twice to Tennessee. They barely beat Vandy. That with Florida, I just don't see where right now they're playing their best basketball.
It's very telling what the public is doing with Florida. The public is going on Virginia Tech right now because Florida actually opened as the favorite. The last time I looked, Virginia Tech was favored. So everyone is leaning towards the Hokies right now. This is one of those games where the money line is minus value for both teams. You're probably looking at something like minus 112 for Virginia Tech, maybe minus 107 for Florida. This is very difficult. Florida, as you've mentioned, they've kind of skidded a little bit ending the year. They've actually failed to cover the spread in 4 straight games. And we'll have to see what the closing spread is because it could be a pick'em, could be Virginia Tech, or it could be Florida favored. So just keep in mind that the Gators, they've actually failed to cover the spread in 4 straight games. They have also failed to go over the point total in 8 of their last 9 games. So it does seem that there is some offensive issues right now going on with the Gators. Looking at Virginia Tech, they haven't really been much better. They have actually failed to cover the spread in 4 of their last 5 games. However, Virginia Tech, a very, very specific stat here, they have won 8 of their last 10 games when playing on a Friday. So there does seem to be a little bit of trends going in favor of Virginia Tech. Depending how finite you want to take those trends is on you. But it does seem like Florida, the odds, the trends are working a bit against them as of right now.
Another SEC team starting up early, 7:35, 7:36 right here, Colgate and Arkansas. And a lot of people want to be cute and take the Raiders of Colgate out of the Patriot League. They went 14-1 this season against Arkansas, who was completely on fire over the last 5-6 weeks of the season. I just don't know how you make a solid case for Colgate. Not saying that it's easy, Arkansas is going to blow them out, but just to say Colgate, we know they can score. The numbers are there, but I still go back to Tom, and it's understandable that when you've played 15 games,
in the
Patriot League, you didn't play anybody out of conference. Who have you played? But that's always tough for me, considering Arkansas was one of the top 3 teams in the SEC this season.
I would actually like to look at what Colgate did against Army, because Army is actually one of the more only teams I kind of somewhat respect out of the Patriot. They actually took Florida to the wire in December earlier this year. So I'd like to see what they did against Army. I think that's a good measuring stick for what Colgate actually is. But there are some stats here that Colgate should cover. Not that they should win, but Arkansas is given about, an 8.5, 9-point spread with, depending on which sportsbook you use. Maybe it could be 9.5 by the time it tips off, depending on how the public's betting. You just don't know. But in that area is a bit worrisome. The computers actually have Colgate covering 7. The final score of 83-76, so they would cover the given 8.5 and 9-point spread. Colgate has covered the spread in 10 of their last 15 games, so that's something to keep in mind. Arkansas, they have failed to cover the spread in 2 of their last 3 games Colgate has failed to cover the spread in 2 of 3 games when they're the underdog, however. So there's mixing trends here, and whenever that happens, I think the best strategy is to just go with the better team, and that would be Arkansas. So again, kind of what you're saying, Kevin, it seems a little cute to take Colgate. They've covered the spread in 10 of 15. They don't do well, though, when they're the underdog, right? And so, yeah, the point total is interesting, 162. Now, Colgate has gone over in 5 of their last 7 games. And they average, 89 points a game, and Arkansas is right around 80. So I do think, although it's a bit high, the point total going over does seem to have a little bit more conviction than the spread. Colgate can easily cover the spread. It's just, they haven't as the underdog in recent games, so I'm leaning towards Arkansas. But overall, the body of work for Colgate is there to cover this game if you fancy the Raiders. Personally, I'm going to go with the point total here just because the spread's a bit too dicey to touch.
The first number 1 seed to play is at 115. Drexel, they're not the 1 seed. Illinois is the 1 seed. Drexel, the 16 seed out of the Colonial, and Illinois laying 22.5, 23. It's a ton of points here. This 741, 742 if you're looking on the screen here. But Illinois, they were very good in the Big Ten this season, and I'm not too sure if they're a Final Four team. They could probably go deep, but facing this Drexel team who was not a top 4 team in the Colonial this season, you had, 5 versus 7, I believe it was, in the CAA championship with Drexel and Elon. So you didn't get the best team out of the Colonial, and you would think Illinois would roll in this one. But I guess first, Tom, what are your thoughts on Drexel and what we can expect from them?
Well, Drexel, they have covered the spread in 12 of 16 games this year. Drexel has covered the spread in 4 straight games and 6 of their last 8. And 23.5 points is a ton to cover if you're Illinois. With that said, Illinois has covered the spread in 6 of their last 7 games. So you have 2 teams who are used to covering the spread. I think 23.5 points is quite insane. Illinois should touch 80 points here, and I would be shocked if Drexel doesn't get into the 60-point territory mark. So I think Drexel should cover 23.5 points. Drexel has gone over in 3 of their last 4 games. Illinois has a point total record of 16, 12, and 1. So I think point total going over is a good bet as well. But of the 2, I think my conviction lies in the point total market as opposed to the spread, because 23.5, it's so much. Illinois is good enough to cover, but Drexel, they've covered 12 of 16 games this year, and 23.5 is just too many points. So I think I'd go with the point total, but if you want to lean Drexel plus 23.5, I can't argue that at all.
Also, I know it's unfair. Maybe I do this and it's not right, but you compare the 1 seeds versus the 16 seeds. You're telling me with the likes of Gonzaga and Baylor and Michigan and now Illinois, that Gonzaga and Michigan are facing 2 teams from last night, a MEAC team and a SWAC team, that Drexel is on the same level as Texas Southern and Norfolk State. Like that, I just can't believe. I got to think Drexel's a little bit better than them.
You would think, but there's a reason they were 5th in the Colonial, and that's just how it is. Colonial was interesting this year because they had a lot of different COVID cases between teams. The Delaware Blue Hens played, I want to say, the first 4 weeks of the season. Then they didn't play almost the rest of the year. It was very up and down. You had William and Mary come and go as well. It was a bit skewed. I mean, the whole 2020 season was skewed with the cancellations of games and COVID and whatnot. So, you look at Drexel's record, they're 10-6 overall. They're 12-4 against the spread, and then they're 9-7 on the point total. It just seems of all those stats, the point total going over seems to just have more constant and more consistency to it because Drexel is playing, they're playing Elon in the Colonial Championship game. How much credit can you put into their ATS stats when they're playing a 7-seeded team in a mid-major conference final? I don't know how much you can put into that. So, again, I think going over the point total in this game between Drexel and Illinois is probably the best way to go.
The next game, Utah State and Texas Tech. That's 7:33, 7:34, right up here. Texas Tech laying 4 against Utah State. Now, you don't normally see at-large teams coming out of the Mountain West. They're a one-bid league normally. San Diego State won the conference championship. They play Syracuse tonight. Texas Tech, who, again, was in the championship the last time we had a championship against Virginia. I mean, they're the most recent runner-up. But Texas Tech, they're with Chris Beard, I just feel like they're so up and down at times that I don't know what to expect out of them. But what about this Utah State team, Tom, that did win, again, if it doesn't mean much, last season they were the Mountain West Tournament champions. They were like one of the last tournament champions before the shutdown. What about this Utah State team? They beat San Diego State twice this year before losing to them in the tournament. What can you tell us about them and their chances to maybe beat Texas Tech?
Well, what Utah State does very well is they play defense. That's pretty much what they hang their hat on this year. Their best player is a center who does everything for them. He blocks shots, he gets rebounds, he scores buckets. They're very slow-tempoed in that regard. And so it should be I would assume, a low-scoring game. You look at the point total record for both schools here. Utah State is 11-16 on the OU, while Texas Tech is 12-15 on the OU. That tells you that the point total for this matchup should go under. Utah State, they've actually gone under in 5 straight games, while Texas Tech has gone under in 4 of their last 5 games. Neither team covers the spread particularly well. I say particularly well recently, because Utah State, they're 16-11 on the ATS, but Utah State has failed to cover the spread in 3 straight games as the underdog. They are underdogs in this game against Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech, what's the spread here? 4? Yeah, they should cover. I see about a 7-point win here for the Red Raiders and Mac McClung kind of just taking over. So give me Texas Tech with the points, and I'll take the under as well.
The 3 o'clock game is Ohio State and Oral Roberts, a 2:15 game. And Ohio State, they're down one of their top players today. The line has dropped 17 to 15.5 or so. And again, the Buckeyes in that top 4 of the Big Ten this year, among the likes of Illinois and Michigan and Iowa. Oral Roberts, who comes out of the Summit League, they score a bunch of points. They were not the top seed in that conference. But what about this one where is it possible? I mean, can Oral Roberts cover? Of course they can. Yeah. Is it possible Oral Roberts can pull off the upset of Ohio State in this 2:15 or no?
No, they're not going to win. They can cover, though. Oral Roberts, they've covered the spread in 4 of their last 5 games. They've covered the spread in 5 of their last 6 when playing as the underdog. And then you look at the spread here, you've got 15.5. It opened at 17. So the public is clearly leaning towards Oral Roberts covering this game. Oral Roberts has gone over the point total in 7 of 9 games. Ohio State has gone over the point total in 3 of 4. So I think going over here, as you also mentioned too, Kevin, Oral Roberts can score buckets. They are a very good offensive team. So I think going over the point total is a good bet. And then Oral Roberts has a lot of trends in which they should cover a large spread given to them by bookmakers. Ohio State has failed to cover the spread in 4 or 5 games when playing as the favorite. So taking all that into consideration, the game should go over and Oral Roberts should cover.
Another one of these high spreads today, the first game on the board, Hartford and Baylor. That's at 3:30, Baylor laying 25.5. The one thing that concerns me about Baylor is just how the COVID stuff really hurt them, the layoff. The first game back against Iowa State, they were down double digits. They were laying 24 points. They barely won that game. They barely won the West Virginia game. They lost at Kansas. They lost to Oklahoma State in the Big 12 tournament. We don't know much about Hartford on a national level out of the America East, but Baylor, again, we're still waiting for them to get back on track to what they were. We know they could score, but still, is that too rich, 25.5?
Yeah, I think 25.5 is a bit too rich. Computers are saying 23. Baylor should win by something close to 80 to 58, 80 to 57. And when you look and you see Baylor should win this game 80 to 57, and that's not covering the spread, you're wondering what would it take to cover the spread. So I would also keep in mind Baylor, they've failed to cover in 5 of their last 7, and Hartford has covered the spread in 5 straight. I know I'm going all point totals here, but this is where the trends are leading me today. Hartford has gone over the point total in 4 of 5, and Baylor has gone over the point total in 11 of 12. Over for Hartford, Baylor. I think that's a better bet, especially because the spread is insanely high for Baylor. And keep in mind, Baylor, they're 22-2. They've lost 2 games in 2 years. So, I understand everyone's freaking out about Baylor right now, but this is still one of the better bets to win March Madness this year. And I think the fact that more people are fading Baylor is even more of a reason to take them. How many people faded Virginia after they lost to a 16 seed? Then they go out, they have the best efficiency ratio in the country, a number 1 seed out of the ACC, which in that year was a much better conference than what we've seen out of the ACC this year. And no one picks Virginia. They get by a few games because you have to get lucky in this tournament. Better lucky than good, as they say. And they end up winning. I think Baylor is in a very similar situation. They have great efficiency ratio. People are fading them, even though they played in one of the toughest conferences and did very well in it. They escaped with a 22-2 overall record this year. So it just seems that the stars are almost aligning for Baylor very similarly to how they aligned for Virginia in 2019 when they won the title.
Speaking of another ACC team that won its championship, Georgia Tech, they play at 4 o'clock against Loyola Chicago. Yeah. And the Yellow Jackets in some trouble. Moses Wright, he is out for the Yellow Jackets, ACC Player of the Year. That's not helpful. So they faced Loyola Chicago, who Ken Palm, their top 10 team. I mean that's how good they are. They won the Missouri Valley. Remember, they were in the Final Four a few years ago, but all of a sudden now laying 5.5, 6, and it always is scary when a top player is out and then everyone quits on them. And that's kind of the feeling that, does Josh Pastner have enough there where Georgia Tech can even hang in this one against Loyola Chicago?
Yeah, I think he does. You've got Michael DeVoe still. You've still got Jose Alvarado. So they still have key pieces on that team. I actually had Georgia Tech winning until the Moses Wright news came out. I now have Loyola Chicago winning the game. Computers have a 5-point victory for Loyola Chicago, so 5.5, 6. Be weary of the spread. Going through some betting trends, however, Georgia Tech, they have covered the spread in 8 of their last 9 games overall. Georgia Tech, they have also covered the spread in 3 straight games when they are the underdog. So a lot of signs are pointing towards Georgia Tech covering the spread. They're probably not going to win this game without the best player in the conference, Moses Wright, but they should be able to still cover the spread. Loyola Chicago has gone under the point total in 5 of their last 7 games, and they are the number 1 defense in terms of points allowed per game in the entire nation. I think if you're going to go with the point total, you go under, but I'm kind of going against what I've been saying all day, and I'm actually going with the point spread here as the best bet of the game instead of the point total. I think the spread, going with Georgia Tech, is the way to go. Don't be discouraged by Moses Wright. They still have enough to get the job done in terms of covering the spread, but without Moses Wright, I don't think we see the outright upset of Georgia Tech over Loyola.
It's a lot of points to lay, and even Loyola Chicago. I know it's unfair to say, well, you're a mid-major, why you're laying this many points against an ACC team, but we see these adjustments, and again, if you paid attention to the NIT, that Richmond-Toledo game a few nights ago, in which
even Drake.
Yeah, that we're overreacting a little bit to. Did I have that right? Did I say Toledo? No, it was.
Yeah, Richmond. No, you said
Richmond. No, it was Richmond Toledo, Richmond Akron. No, it was Richmond Toledo, right? Right. Okay.
I don't see NIT.
Okay. Oh. Okay. You're too busy with the tournament. No, you do watch the NIT. But the point is that Richmond had their top 2 guys out, and there was a huge line adjustment. Richmond ended up winning the game, and they had lost 3 straight towards the end of the season. So they weren't even playing well. They were without their top 2 players and still went in and won in a neutral site.
And
so
I know we'll get to this game, but I know we're going to get to this game eventually. But yeah, Villanova. They're falling into this category of Richmond and Drake, where their best player is hurt, and now people are fading them. But should they? And so we'll get to that. Yeah, but Villanova's right in that same category.
So the 4:30 game, Oregon State and Tennessee, 7:45, 7:46. So intriguing. 8.5 points. That's what Tennessee is laying. Now, a couple things on this. Number one, Oregon State. They've been dynamic against the spread recently. They ran the table in the Pac-12 tournament. Even before that, they were playing well. And Tennessee has not been good in the favorite role of late. And I'm going to pull up those numbers in a second while Tom looks at this matchup. But that's where you say, do you keep riding a team like Oregon State, who's been playing very well, in Tennessee, who's kind of sputtered towards the end, or Oregon State's ride is going to end now and Tennessee's going to kind of buck up, even though Rick Barnes, he has not been a great coach to back in the tournament. His numbers have not been very good.
You brought 2 things that speak true to some of the trends here. You say Oregon State, they annihilate the spread, and they do. Oregon State, they have covered the spread in 10 of 11. They had their ATS record this season is 18-9-1, so they've covered the spread in 18 of 28 games this year. That's phenomenal. And then you say Tennessee, where they've kind of sputtered as the favorite. They have. Tennessee is. They've covered as 4 of 6 when they are the favorites. However, they have sputtered tremendously this year against teams that they should have beaten in the regular season. I don't have Tennessee's regular season schedule in front of me.
I do. Hold on.
Okay, Kevin.
What we have here. That's the point of the site.
But Tennessee had staggering losses in which they should have covered the game. Let's see. We have Missouri. There's one. They should have. At Florida. Keep in mind, Florida was kind of going through some turmoil there at the time as well. You have Ole Miss at Ole Miss, and I know a lot of people say they were a bubble team. Ole Miss finished the season 13-11. Okay, so that's what they were. Kentucky. I mean, that's a huge. Look at that point loss right there against Kentucky. So, I mean, they just have staggering losses in games in which they should win. I think this is one of those games. They should beat Oregon State, but you look and you see, okay, a loss to Kentucky. Okay, at LSU. I mean, I guess that's okay. At Ole Miss, a game at home against Missouri. These are games that Tennessee should win.
Auburn?
Yeah, and Auburn, too. I mean, yeah, Auburn. At Auburn, I mean, you could say, oh, they're on the road. That doesn't matter. I think Tennessee is one of those teams that should win almost every single one of their games on paper, and they don't. And I'm not sure when they were an underdog, other than against maybe Alabama this year. They've been a favorite for most of the season. And so the fact they have 8 losses and they've been a favorite for most of the season in most of the games they played in, yeah, I mean, you look at all those minus values right there. That's insane. They've been the favorite every single game, and they've lost 8. And granted, you lost to Alabama. That's one of the 8. I get that. But there's just basically, in a nutshell, lack of consistency in Tennessee covering this year. And against a team like Oregon State, who has covered the spread in 10 of 11, I got to wonder if they're going to do it again. So, honestly, I think the point total is the way to go here. I think you go over. Oregon State has gone over the point total in 6 straight games, and Tennessee has gone over the point total in 9 of 10 after going under. And Tennessee went under against Alabama. So the trends align for the point total going over. And then the spread, I think Oregon State will cover. If you like Tennessee, though, I can't argue it because, like you said, Kevin, they're a talented enough team to do well, but they've sputtered in moments this year, so they just lack consistency. That's my issue with them.
Oregon State, here I have some numbers. Okay, Tom mentioned the 10-1 ATS run. You see it there on the screen.
Yeah.
8-2 against the spread. Last 10 as a dog of 6 or more. Tennessee on the flip side, 3-9-1 against the spread. Their last 13 when laying 7 or more. 1-4 against the spread. Their last 5 in the tournament.
What's the spread for this one?
7.5, 8.
Okay.
8. But look at some of the teams they faced here. Colorado, Oregon, UCLA, Oregon, Colorado. Even Arizona State was a good team. Arizona was a good team.
Yep.
Last bad loss was to Colorado here back in February. And look, they lost by 13 at home to Oregon, but they got back at. They beat Oregon twice this year, so you got to give them that. But I think that that Oregon State is just too hard to go against them. I mean, you can.
Tennessee's just been too spurty, so Tennessee should win this game. Like, they have no excuse to lose this game. But, again, they've been spurty. They lost to Kentucky. They lost to Auburn. So I think the conviction lies with Oregon State. But, again, the point total going over has the trends. So that's what I'm going to do for this game is go over.
All right, let's look at some of the night action now in the tournament. And I guess the first matchup we'll look at is, I guess we'll go with Wisconsin. Let's go with Liberty, Oklahoma State. That's the weird 6:25 start at 7:47, 7:48 here. Oklahoma State laying 7.5. You don't like Liberty at all. You've said that the last few days. But Oklahoma State, they have, they played well. But now let's see what they're made of.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma State wins probably by 9 or 10 points. Liberty, I've said multiple times, I just don't think they're as good as they were when they knocked out Mississippi State in 2019. Oklahoma State, they've covered the spread in 8 of 9 in arguably one of the better conferences in the nation. They're one of the hottest teams right now. The point total spread, the point total market has a little bit less conviction in it. Liberty has failed to go under the point total in 4 straight games. Oklahoma State has gone over in 7 of 8. So you have crossing trends in the point total market. I would get away from that. I think people might be overthinking this a little bit too much. Oklahoma State should win this game by 9 to 10 points. Cade Cunningham is going to be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. And the thing about Oklahoma State that makes them so dangerous is that they're good around Cade Cunningham. This isn't like a Texas team where Kevin Durant had nobody and they were booted in the first round. They have Isaac Likely. They have Boom, who is a big man who can both dunk and shoot. He can bring men out to the perimeter and shoot, and he can go take it and dunk on your face. He is that dynamic of a player. And then Avery Anderson has come out of nowhere in the past week and a half, 2 weeks of the season, and has been playing like one of the best players in the conference. So I think Oklahoma State is riddled with talent. They've got the best player, one of the best players in the nation, and Liberty is just not as good as they were a year ago. That loss at Stetson this year really opened my eyes for Liberty. They are just not the same team they were last year. Give me Oklahoma State with the points. I think they win by 9 or 10. I'm avoiding the point total market, however.
The 7-10 game, 7-10 tip-off, not 7-10 as far as seeding. It's the 8-9 game.
Close, though.
Yeah, right. Wisconsin, North Carolina. All right, North Carolina, let's start with them. They're laying 1.5. There's a second game here at the top. And North Carolina had some good wins down the stretch. They beat FSU at home. They were down big in that one. I know they beat Duke a few times, and Duke is not a tournament team. But I want to go to North Carolina's page for a second. Yeah. And the Tar Heels, they won their final 3. Well, they won 3 before losing to Florida State. They blew out Notre Dame and Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament. They blew out Duke, lost at Syracuse. This loss against Marquette, remember that was scheduled 2 days before, and they ended up losing that one. But when you look at North Carolina and the body of work with them, I mean, it does feel a little up and down, and it feels like, they bulked up against teams that didn't make the tournament.
Yeah, they started the season incredibly slow. They're just so young. And as you can see, if you look through the calendar, they lose, they win, they lose, they win, but they get better, and they get better, and they get better, and they're just slowly improving as the year goes on. The Syracuse loss by 2 points is actually a decent loss. Syracuse, I believe, had won 11 games in the Carrier Dome this year. Syracuse does not lose at home this year for some reason. They're just unbeatable there. And so I don't think that's a terrible loss. Syracuse is actually in the tournament. We'll see what they end up doing. But I think UNC is one of the more obvious teams that has shown improvement over the year. Normally you'll see teams get hot, then they kind of cool off. I think that happened with San Diego State last year. Before they entered the NCAA tournament because it was shut down. They were starting to skid a little bit. It's been the opposite with UNC. They started slow. They're very young. Roy Williams, a good coach. They've got Garrison Brooks as a great senior leader to Armando Bacot and Caleb Love, 2 young, talented players on that team. And they're learning, they're improving, they're growing. I think they're very dangerous. The spread in this game worries me with UNC and Wisconsin. I think the point total going over might actually be the way to go. Now, Wisconsin is 14-15 on the OU, while UNC is 13-15. That tells you that they should go under. Keep in mind, UNC has gone over in 3 straight, while Wisconsin has gone over in 4 of their last 5. Both are playing very desperate ball. I think one team touches 70 points, and the other team keeps it within a one-possession game, which should see the point total go over if you're given the, 137.5, 136 in that territory. So UNC, Wisconsin, I want to lean Wisconsin, but UNC's been playing so good and they've been improving so much. I'm going to avoid the spread, which is basically a pick 'em anyways, and I'm going to go over, assuming one team touches 70 and the other team keeps it within one possession.
One thing that scares me with Wisconsin down the stretch is you see the Badgers schedule here on the screen.
Yeah.
Here are their wins recently. Well, first let's go with the wins. Penn State, Northwestern, Nebraska, Penn State, Maryland, Northwestern, Rutgers, Indiana, Minnesota. Okay, they beat Michigan State here on the road. They destroyed Louisville, but that was after Louisville had a COVID break. They lose at Marquette. So there weren't a lot of convincing wins. Then the losses: Iowa, Purdue, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Illinois, lose to Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. So really, a lot of the losses, even Maryland up here, they lost to at home. For the exception of losing to Penn State, every other team they played and lost to is in the tournament. So we'll give them that you say, okay, where's North Carolina? Obviously, North Carolina is not on the level of Illinois or Michigan or Iowa, but Wisconsin has the potential to do it, but it feels like Wisconsin played they played when they played down competition, they beat them. When they played up competition, they struggled.
Like, they won their games they were supposed to win. They lost games they were supposed to lose. Like, there was no real surprise with any of Wisconsin's games this year. Basically, what you see is what you get with the Badgers. What makes me really fade North Carolina, despite how well they've been playing, how poorly Wisconsin's been playing, is the experience factor. Like, you can't just write that off. I'm not a huge Greg Card fan. I just think he's kind of somewhat underachieved with that team, kind of taking Bo Ryan's talent, and we'll see what happens from there. But this team has a ton of experience, and that's kind of what I'm leaning on a little bit, is that you have all these players who have been here before, who have done it before. And I remember, I don't know if I was talking with you or somebody about this, but what experience and what having seniors and upperclassmen on your roster does is it helps you in adversity. Like, okay, so we look at Wisconsin right here. They've lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They've lost 6 of their last 8 games. They have so many seniors on that team that have been playing for so long, that have been in these moments. That's not going to phase them. They have a very short memory. And if you're talking about an intense moment in a close game where it's a 1-point game and Wisconsin needs a big play, I trust Wisconsin to make a smarter play than their opponents just because of the experience, and they've been there before. I trust their IQ a little bit more than a lot of teams in this tournament, and I trust their decision-making in big moments. Now, whether we're going to get those big moments, that time will tell. But if Wisconsin is faced in the moment of adversity in a huge game or in a close game during the tournament, I have to give them the benefit of the doubt, which is why I'm not leaning UNC, because of the Wisconsin experience. So I'm going to go with the point total going over here. Hopefully one of the teams touches 70, and I'll go from there. But I have no conviction in Wisconsin covering, and I have too much conviction in their experience. So I don't know what to do with the point spread. I'm just going to fade it and go with the point total market in this game.
And also, if you looked at Wisconsin's last few games, they lost by 4, by 5 to some of those quality teams. Yeah, it's tough. I think it's one of the toughest games you got tonight. Now, also at 7:15, Cleveland State and Houston, a 2:15 game. And Houston laying a ton. I know you really like this Houston team, Tom.
Yes,
Cleveland State out of the horizon. This was a squad that lost to Ohio in non-conference play. They got outscored by 40 points at one point in the game. They got scored 40-0 in one stage of the game, pre-conference season. And then Cleveland State actually went 15-3 or 16-3 in the horizon, and they end up winning the tournament. And there wasn't a lot expected out of them this season, but they could be running into a bit of a buzzsaw here because Houston, we've seen them a lot this year that they can blow you out pretty fast.
Well, Houston has the second best defense in the nation in terms of points allowed per game. Houston also has the 4th highest efficiency rating on the defensive side of the court in the entire country, and a lot of Houston's offense comes from that defense. they're able to force a turnover and run it right down the court and into the bucket. Watching Houston play is almost like watching someone learn how to swim, because like they're just all over the court and they're just like really messy and their arms are everywhere, and it's almost like unorthodox or it's almost like orthodox chaos. It's organized chaos in a way. It's quite intriguing to watch. I think the 20-point spread is way too much, though. I see Houston getting the 75. Cleveland State should get a little over 55, I would think, which would see Cleveland State cover the 20-point spread. This is actually a very difficult game to decipher because Cleveland State has covered the spread in 4 of their last 6 games, and then the point total trends, they're all over the place. Houston has gone over in 5 of 7. Cleveland State has gone under in 3 straight after going over the game prior. So I think, honestly, this would be one of the only games, as much as I like Houston to make a deep run in this tournament, betting this individual game, I might fade in general. Now, if you're forcing me to make a pick here, I'm going to go with Cleveland State covering an enormous 20-point spread, although Houston, I do like going deep in this tournament, mainly because they play great defense, highly efficient on both sides of the court, offense and defense, and then they have one of the better coaches that nobody is talking about in the country in Kelvin Sampson. So tough game, very tough game to pick. I would fade it, but if you have to pick, maybe go with Cleveland State.
The final 7:25 or 7 o'clock hour game, I guess, is North Texas and Purdue, 7:31, 7:32, right up here. And Purdue is laying 7.5. Only Indiana school in this tournament, so they don't have the travel like everyone else does. Money came in on North Texas. I took North Texas a few times in the Conference USA tournament against Louisiana Tech and against Western Kentucky, 2 highly contested games. They won both of them. You know, they're a pretty quality team out of Conference USA, so there's really, like, it's not a surprise that they end up winning the conference. But with Purdue, though, that they... Again, I hate to call them a second-tier Big Ten team. It's not fair. You've had 4 elite teams this year in the Big Ten, and they're like number 5. They're right below it. But Purdue, the lack of travel, I do like them tonight. And North Texas, they don't allow a lot of points. They played 4 straight games in the Conference USA tournament, won 4 in 4 days. Non-conference, they lost to the likes of Arkansas, Mississippi State, and West Virginia. So I just don't know against the higher level what North Texas can do.
I think they'll be okay. I do think 7 to 8 is a bit high. I think I might want to take Purdue if it was closer to 4.5 in this, maybe 5. I think North Texas keeps it close. I think they keep it within 6, but lose the game. North Texas, they've covered the spread in 4 straight games. Purdue, however, has covered the spread in 5 of 6. North Texas, as you mentioned, they don't give a ton of points. They've gone under the point total in 3 straight games. And Purdue, they typically keep games a little low scoring just because of their style of play is very slow tempoed. They don't have a ton of great 3-point shooters as well. They usually like to play from the inside out, beginning with Trevion Williams. So I'm going to go under the point total for this game, and I think there's a little bit more conviction in the total market than the spread. But if I'm picking the spread, I do feel comfortable taking North Texas with, 8.5, 7.5 points. So, give me North Texas with the spread and give me the point total going under.
All right, the final 4 games of the night, the 4 late night games, the chase games. Rutgers and Clemson, 7:53, 7:54 right here at 9:20, and Rutgers laying 1.5 against Clemson. And this one very intriguing because both these teams very good defensively. Yeah. Clemson's not great offensively. Here's the thing I don't love about Rutgers. We're going to look at their schedule here. That a lot of people thought they were a tournament team by January because they beat Syracuse, they beat Maryland, they beat Illinois, they beat Purdue. A lot of quality wins. But then when you get to the second half of the season, I mean, they had this 5-game losing streak. And then from January on, beat Indiana, Michigan State, who got bounced already, Northwestern, Minnesota, Northwestern, Indiana, Minnesota, Indiana. They really didn't beat any quality opponents over the last few months. And, Clemson, they actually played well down the stretch. Clemson right here, they lost to Miami. That's a bad loss. You can't lose that one. Miami's all dinged up. But, losing to Syracuse, besides that, some quality wins at home against North Carolina, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, 3 teams. That's really good. Some tough places. But here, Tom, I want to point this out early in the season. Purdue, Maryland, Alabama. They had some good wins in non-conference play.
I mean, there's a reason Clemson was ranked 9th in the nation in December. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see where their season went off the charts, and that was against Virginia. And then it didn't get any better from there. They were able to get the 3-game winning streak with early February, mid-February, that basically kept them in the conversation of, okay, they're definitely in the tournament. Because there was a few games there for a little bit where it's like, well, if Clemson loses 3 or 4 more games, they're probably where Louisville is right now, where you have a decent ACC team looking from the outside in. But they were able to get those wins. I think Clemson, I don't think they win this game. I do think Rutgers is slightly better team. The Clemson offense is so bad, you just can't back them away from Clemson, South Carolina. Anytime Clemson hits the road, their offense is just non-existent. They failed to cover the spread in 3 of 4 games, and Rutgers has actually gone under the point total in 6 straight games after going over the game prior. Rutgers went over the point total in their last game. Clemson's defense, everything is pointing towards the point total going under. If I'm picking a winner, I'm going to go Rutgers, but I think the point total going under is the best bet for this game. Keep in mind, Rutgers actually started as a high-octane offensive team. And then they lost to Ohio State. As Kevin had shown the schedule, they had lost a few after that. And I really do believe the coach of Rutgers said, okay, enough's enough. We need to start playing defense. Because midway through the season, Rutgers' points allowed per game began to drop. Now, I don't know if maybe the switching style of play had anything to do with Rutgers maybe becoming more inconsistent, but defense has now been implemented with the Scarlet Knights when they started the season as an offensive juggernaut. So I think that's very interesting that you're basically getting 2 defensive teams in this battle. I like the point total going under.
Now in the final 3 games, where was I? It was Syracuse, San Diego State.
Yeah.
And Syracuse getting 3 here. You have an ACC Mountain West matchup, very intriguing. Yeah. Syracuse this season, straight up, 8 games they played as a dog away from the Carrier Dome. They were 1-7. The only one coming out NC State. So they were not a good team on the road as an underdog. And again, it's a neutral site game. You're playing San Diego State, the champions of the Mountain West, and they cruised to an excellent record. It was 23-4.
Yeah, you got a trend that you love.
I had the trend that I did like on Sunday, but then I went away from it. And the trend is, and I'll tell you if you're tuning in for the first time, the last 7, again, we're not counting Utah State last year because there was no tournament. The last 7 Mountain West Tournament champions lost their first round game in the NCAA Tournament. So Bad matchup, whatever you want to say. And San Diego State's been guilty in some of those because obviously they're a tournament team most every year. They've won a lot of tournaments in the Mountain West. But what about Syracuse and your thoughts with them? Because Syracuse is just so up and down. They had Virginia. I don't want to say they had them beat, but they had an opportunity to beat them. Virginia hit that 3 at the buzzer in the ACC tournament. We know Boeheim, and he can take them far. But how good is this Syracuse team, and can they knock off San Diego State?
I mean, they're all right. Yeah, they can knock off San Diego State. They're okay. I just think Syracuse is the beneficiary of being a historically good program. That's how they kind of got into this tournament. They went on a hot streak, though, to end the year. They've covered the spread in 4 straight games to get to this tournament. Syracuse, for the entire season up until the last week, was not in the tournament, and then they're in. So they're arguably one of the hottest teams right now. Despite losing in the ACC tournament, they covered the spread in that game. And so San Diego State absolutely worries me. You mentioned the stat about the Mountain West not having won a first-round game, or at least the Mountain West champion hasn't won a first-round game in the tournament in 7 straight years, not counting 2020, obviously. Syracuse, they've covered the spread in 4 straight. San Diego State has failed to cover the spread in 4 of their last 5 games. I think the point total going over is also worth a look here. Syracuse, they've gone over in 4 of 6. San Diego State has gone over in 3 straight after going under the game prior. San Diego State, they're 14-12 on the OU this year. Syracuse is 13-12. So it's almost split, but it actually slightly leans towards the point total going over. I think Syracuse, I think they cover, honestly. What's the spread? What are we at here? It is 3. It's about right at it. So I'll give Syracuse the benefit of the doubt because they've covered in 4 straight, and San Diego State has not in 4 of 5. And I'm going to go with the point total going over. Those would be my picks for this game.
And the last 2, Morehead State, West Virginia, and I feel like West Virginia, I've said this so many times, I like them to go to the Final Four, but I could also see them getting tripped up by Morehead State. It's either lose this game or make it to the Final Four. For West Virginia, for Huggins. And he's never won a championship, so obviously he wants that. Morehead State, looking at them out of the Ohio Valley, and the numbers that they had, we never really focused on them through some of the live streams this week. But Morehead State went through this run. Yeah. January 2nd, they lost to Clemson, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 straight wins. Lost to Belmont, the best team in the conference. Right. 12-1, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19-1. So they win 19 of 20, with the only loss coming to the best team in the Ohio Valley.
And then they beat the best team. Then they beat the best team by 15 points in the championship game. So they're legit. Morehead State, I like this team. I'm not bold enough to take them to win. However, Morehead State has covered the spread in 4 or 5 games, and West Virginia has failed to cover the spread in 4 straight. So I think there is some dangling fruit there for you if you think Morehead State can cover a large spread as an underdog. I think I'll take Morehead State to cover. West Virginia, they've gone over in 3 of 4 games, and Morehead State is 10-18 on the OU, so there's a little bit of crossing trends in the point total market. I don't know. My hands are tied. I take Morehead State to cover. I like, Kevin, that I pulled up a stat where it said Morehead State has won the first game of an NCAA tournament in 5 of 7 appearances. Their last appearance was as recent as 2011, as recent as about a decade ago. But you can see that there is some dangling fruit for those who want to take Morehead State to possibly cover a large spread. But West Virginia, they're too good. Miles McBride, Derek Culver, Taz Sherman, we go over this every day. They have no excuse to not reach the Sweet 16 with the bracket that they have been given.
And seeing 2 of 3 times, or let me do my math again. Belmont, let's see, they beat Belmont as a 7-point dog. They beat Belmont as a 4-point dog towards the end of the season. Yep. Lost by 15 to Belmont, so they drew them 3 times late. Beat Murray State as a 2.5-point dog. Beat Jacksonville State as a 3.5-point dog.
Eastern Illinois.
Yeah, Eastern Illinois, Jacksonville State, Murray State, Clemson. They lost by 15 but covered as a 24.5-point dog. Eastern Kentucky, the only bad one was against Ohio State early on in the season. So Morehead State, they were pretty good against the spread as an underdog. So that's something definitely to keep an eye on in this game.
Yeah, I'm not going to take them. I know. Earlier in the week, I was kind of flying high on the Morehead State Eagle wings, but those wings have been clipped. Unfortunately, I'm gonna go with the Mountaineers in this one. Got to play the odds in this tournament. You just have to.
The final game we want to look at is another game that feels like very divided with a lot of people's Villanova and Winthrop, 7:29, 7:30 here, third game. Villanova laying 6.5. Colin Gillespie, he's out for the Wildcats, the knee injury. Villanova had a lot of questionable losses. I mean, before that, they lost to Providence and Georgetown after Gillespie got hurt. They lost to St. John's. They lost to Butler. They have a lot of really bad losses away from Villanova this season. Now they're laying 6.5 against Winthrop.
I actually think Nova gets it done, though. I think a lot of people are fading Villanova for obvious reasons. It's too obvious to me. And we've talked about teams who have actually thrived. I don't say they thrived, but they've won and survived without their best players already. We've seen it twice, one in the NIT and one in March Madness, and you could even make a case that UCLA did it as well against Michigan State without Chris Smith, without Jalen Hill, and without a man who scored 27 points for them in overtime. They were without him for the entire overtime period. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on one of the better players not being there. But keep in mind, Villanova still has 3 or 4 players that average a double-digit point total without Gillespie. I think they got 3 other players, one of them being sophomore Jeremiah Robinson Earl. The thing that concerns me with Villanova is that their now leader and point scoring leader is a sophomore. It was a little bit concerning. It went from a senior in Gillespie to a sophomore in Jeremiah Robinson Earl, but he is good enough to take this team over and lead them. They've got guys like Brandon Slater still there. So I think Villanova covers, and I think that they advance. I think Villanova, it's weird to say, as a 5 seed and a team that has won the tournament, twice in the last 5 years, they're a sleeper as a first-round 5 seed in this. So I like Villanova. They failed to cover 3 of the last 4, as we've mentioned, but again, I don't think that matters. The crossing trends here are the point total market. Winthrop has failed to go over the point total in 6 straight games. That includes 1 push. Villanova, they have gone under in 4 of 6. So if you think that the crossing spread trends are too much for you, or the injury to Gillespie, and you're unsure about Winthrop, Nova, what to do, go under. Go under here. All the trends are saying the point total should go under. So if you're weary on the spread, take the under. But I think Villanova should earn your conviction in this game. It's very easy to fade them, though. It's a lot tougher, I think, to take Villanova than it is to fade them in this game, which is a bit odd to say, but here we are, 2021.
And we went over every single game here on Friday, 16 games. There's 16 more tomorrow, and 16 teams will advance today. 16 will leave the Indiana bubble.
That's right.
And or Purdue will just stay in Indiana, just not be in the bubble anymore if they lose to North Texas. But anyway, so that's the look at today's action. Don't forget that you see the banner here on the bottom, Greg Smith. He is the money leader in college basketball, so check out his picks. You can go to our buy picks page. Actually, if you look here on our odds page, on the right column, buy picks corresponding to the game, instead of looking at just the handicapper. I mean, you can pick the handicapper, but, let's say like Winthrop and Villanova, you click on buy picks, you have the handicappers that are on that game if you want that specific game and get different opinions on that. So you can go there, or you can go to the buy picks page where you see the handicappers and what they have for today. And you see the amount of picks by different handicappers. So you could pick the handicapper. You can also look at the game and see what they have. And, of course, if it's in their daily package, then you get more than just that one game if they have more than one game. So
better hurry, though.
Yeah, you better hurry up.
Minutes.
Yeah, this thing is going to expire. Well, not expire. Just Florida, Virginia Tech is the one game you're not going to get. But where is it? I wrote it down. I did this yesterday, and I screwed this up. And let me see if I got it again. It was the consensus I had for today. And I think that, what did Danny tell me? He said the consensus for, see that's why you can't. This is why you can't write things down on legal pads like you're a lawyer. You know that's the problem, is that you have all these notes here, and I had it ready. You have your stuff all organized.
And throwing lawyers under the bus.
I am. Actually, they're called attorneys. That's what they like to be called, not lawyers. Who was it again, Danny? Oral Roberts. That's who it was. See, Oral Roberts covering against Ohio State.
I did say that.
That's one of the big consensus picks. Is Oral? Oh, Utah State. That's the other one he said. See, it was only 2 games. Utah State against Texas State and Oral Roberts. Those were the 2 consensus picks among the handicappers.
Right,
so
I like Oral Roberts a little bit more.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on those two underdogs. So you can check out the picks. College basketball. Also, we have NBA tonight. We have NHL. So don't forget about that. Not only just the college hoops. So there's plenty to bet on as well today. We're going to be back with you. We're not going to do, obviously, the 1 o'clock live stream today since we have the games. But we'll be back with you tomorrow at about around 9:30 a.m. Eastern. And we'll look ahead to Saturday's card in college basketball. So we're looking forward to that. And we appreciate you watching. If you just tuned in late, then you can catch the entire live stream for all the action later on in the day, coming up in just pretty much whenever you want to. Yeah. So that is coming up. Yeah, whenever you're ready, you can do it. So for Thom Cunningham, I am Kevin Rogers. We appreciate you tuning in to the Daily Insider right here on VegasInsider.com. Best of luck with your bets here on March Madness.